Hello, and welcome to Quality During Design, the place to use quality thinking to create products others love for less. My name is Diana Dini. I'm a senior level quality professional and engineer with over 20 years of experience in manufacturing and design. Listen in and then join the conversation. Visit qualityduringdesign.com and subscribe. Today, we're talking about how product design engineers can maximize their relationship with other cross-functional groups. We have a special guest today, Laura Krick. Laura is Vice President of Clinical and Market Development at Interad Medical in Pennsylvania. She's responsible for assessing global market opportunities, expanding the company's product portfolio, and ensuring more patients get better catheter securement. She manages several global education and support programs that not only help with customers' experiences, but also drive successful adoption of products and drives revenue growth for the business. She has her finger on the pulse of her customers, the market, sales, and new product development. So I'm so happy to welcome Laura. She's with us today to share her viewpoint and expertise about several roles with product design, namely sales, clinical, and marketing. So hi, Laura. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. That was a very, very flattering introduction. I appreciate that, Diana. It's a pleasure.
Oh, I'm very happy to be talking with you. You and I had worked on a project. That's how we know each other, but it was ages ago.
I know it's hard to believe. It feels like yesterday, some of these projects that we spent a lot of our time on. But it's nice to get back together on this topic. So
yeah, thanks for joining us. You wear many hats. You wear sales, clinical, and marketing, and you're involved in new product development. So how did you grow into the role you're in today?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. I would say that it really happened from my role in cross-functional teams at Aero and then Teleflex, working on new product development projects. I got the opportunity to work with the new product development engineering team, with our quality and regulatory teams, with key opinion leaders and clinicians in the field, collecting market research and market feedback. And having had such a broad and vast experience during the time I was at Aero, I think led me to this opportunity at a new and up and coming company in Minnesota. So when I left Teleflex, I became their global director of clinical market development, and really was brought on to help accelerate the adoption of this unique technology that was practice changing, but very, very advanced from the other norms that were being used for catheter securement. So because of my past experience, I was able to kind of analyze, come to the table with fresh perspective, and then use the projects, the programs, the lessons I had learned in the past and apply them to the experiences and this really cool organization. Interad is a smaller company, and when you come to a smaller company, you wear lots of hats. So I was able to basically take my strengths and the things I enjoyed doing the most and apply them broadly across the portfolio. When I was first hired, I was really focused on accelerating the learning curve and improving the market messaging and the market branding, pulling in feedback from key opinion leaders. I held several focus groups and meetings to learn about how best to ensure that the customers were having an optimal experience. And from those, then I became, I guess a year and a half later, I became in charge of sales as well.
Wow. So you joined a small company with a new innovative idea that changed the way that people did things in the field. Yeah. It sounds like you were very instrumental in helping to train users how to do something new and different.
Yes, I was very fortunate. This technology I was not unfamiliar with in my role at my prior company. We had looked at it. It was a very interesting concept at the time. Fast forward several years later, they were commercial and selling their product in several markets, and had actually just launched, at the time I joined their company, they had just launched a revision to that product. based on customer feedback, users' feedback. They basically enhanced the usability of the product, made it more intuitive, provided direction actually on the device, and improved the human factors, the ergonomics of the product. With that, I came on board, and since the product design had really been optimized, I focused in on how customers learned to use it and what the environmental changes were for the users. So we started by segmenting the use applications. In our product, there's a placement, there's an interaction for caring, and then there's an interaction at removal. So our device isn't changed with every dressing change like the alternative. Our device goes on at insertion. It stays on until the catheter is removed. And that's actually one of its key advantages, because there's a lot less room for operator error in those interactions, which can cause harm to the patient. Because of this distinct design advantage, we wanted to make sure that the learning curve and the interactions with the device were optimized as well. So through the key opinion leader programs I held, we came to learn from those who had successfully adopted it what we needed to do to accelerate that experience, and mapped that out and built a series of educational programs, which we then piloted and adjusted, piloted and adopted to, again, improve upon the metrics that we had established for the product. So using key performance metrics, we identified a process and then continued to improve upon that process, month after month after month, until we got to a point where we felt like it was optimized, and then built the team around those processes.
That sounds like a great model for user experience.
I would say anytime you use data to inform your decision making and adjust, it is a good thing. This is something I learned from my colleagues in quality and regulatory, because even my engineering colleagues, I saw how we iterated change in the new product development process. And I said, you make decisions based on information, and it's very data driven. And why should it be any different in the process of learning a new technology or the process of driving change? The last couple of years, the pandemic's really driven to a lot of technology adoption for everyone: podcasts, e-learning, videos, YouTube. And the beauty of the digital age is really constant metrics. There's this constant, probably over metric, that's constantly you're being bombarded with lots and lots of information, and it's trying to mine through that information and figure out what's important and how does it relate to my target market, and how does it relate to the goals I'm trying to achieve within that space.
You're gathering a lot of information from the social sites and from, I guess, big data, but then you're also purposefully talking and developing relationships with customers so you can learn better how to serve them too, it sounds like.
Absolutely. I mean, your innovators and your first group of adopters are usually the ones that inform the decisions for how best to move forward. They're also the ones that are driving and validating the success of any given technology. So as they've continued to use it, they've seen that they can use it in multiple applications, and then they've applied it in those ways, and then continue to share their evidence, share their publication. So it drives sort of a market adoption, because peers reflect on what other peers are doing successfully. In the UK, the adoption was really driven by a handful of sites that started to use the technology and document their outcomes. And because it's a social healthcare system, there's a lot of data that's documented and captured internally. From that, the National Institute for Care and Health Excellence evaluated our technology amongst 4 others. There were 288 technologies actually that were, or 280 some technologies that were evaluated, but 4 were selected for a recommendation. The NICE guidance kind of fast forwarded into what became the Innovative Technology Adoption Program. And that led to a payment for the technologies they felt had the biggest impact, both economically and on reducing costly negative outcomes in the healthcare system. So our technology was selected for that, and that drove a greater level of adoption in that particular market. and then subsequently led to an adoption through their supply chain. So the NHS supply chain, because of those prior recommendations, have driven new technology through the data that was generated by the first few sites that started to use the technology in that market.
So you're not only working with the end users who are actually using it, but then also government affiliations, and you're kind of considering them as customers also. And you're
Yes.
kind of looking at what they want and what they need and how they can be leveraged as a customer.
In every market, you have to work with the decision makers. And in certain markets, especially in healthcare, there's social healthcare. So the government is a key decision maker because there's either tenders or there's contracts, there's supply chain that plays a role, and that's a government funding process. In each market, there's different variables to assess and consider. And this is similar to regulatory constraints or regulatory considerations. You have, the EU MDA and all of these other organizations that are putting together guidelines and standards that medical device companies have to test, market, and prepare their products for market through. And if you understand the markets you want to enter and you have that assessment done, then you plug in what layers of organization will help facilitate. And financing the product, meaning how is the hospital or how is the end user going to pay for your product, is a key variable to understand before you go to market. And once you're in market, if you're struggling, if you're not growing as fast as you expect, it's always an opportunity to step back and say, how can I look at reimbursement? How can I look at the payment systems in a given market and work with that to understand the advantages of our technology? There's a number of different ways to look at reimbursement and healthcare financing and see how that can also be a driver and an accelerator in your technology.
Okay, so I'm getting a good idea that the types of unique insights your roles gives you in new product development, not only how people use it, but why they would want to adopt it and how they could have success for it. And you're also collecting more information about the field performance and gathering field data. If a product design engineer were to work with sales or field ops or marketing, do they have a different scope of information that they could help share with the product design engineers as they're designing or iterating on designs? Or is it normally one person that communicates with product development engineers? How have you worked with engineers in the past with this data and information?
So I try to put the engineers directly into the field. And if I can't, I try to bring those voices to the engineers. And I've done this a number of different ways. More recently, we've done key opinion leader panels. You can do focus groups and have the engineers be an instrumental part of those. We did a hybrid event where we actually were prototyping a new technology. And in that prototyping process, we held both a focus group and hands-on to get some design feedback on certain elements of the design. So each project, the scope and the expanse of the project, what you're trying to achieve, the goal of the project should establish who is on that team and how many people you bring to the table to contribute feedback along the way. And again, those people participating in that feedback loop in that KOL group that we had weren't necessarily team members for the new product development project, but they were part of that feedback loop as the project was ongoing. And again, our expectation is to bring some of those same people back to the table at different phases of the project as it continues through the product development process. When I kick off a project, I like to bring the folks that are working in the lab and in the environment to the environment in which the product is intended so that they can see all the environmental factors and the human factors that go into a product success. You could work in a lab and have really, really incredible and talented engineers with great design aspects. But if they haven't been at the bedside, if they haven't seen what the product's going to look like in its natural environment, in healthcare in particular, you're going to lose something in translation. And so it might look really good on the bench. It might look really good on paper, but if you're not actually seeing it in that environment, you're likely to end up down a very expensive pathway and potentially fail. And you don't want to get so far down a road that you believe your idea is perfect before you've actually seeded it in that environment. You want to take those iterations and understand how they fit into the environment and get that feedback loop going as early in the process as possible, but continue it throughout the process so that you're not stepping too far astray from the end game of getting to a commercial launch, getting to satisfy the unmet need in the market, and launching a successful product into that space.
Yeah, I think I think you're absolutely right that there is no substitute for just being there. As many analyses are, that you can look at on paper, and information, it's always good to just see it because it is hard to translate and communicate that otherwise.
Yeah, and it's getting harder too with the new regulations. The expectations for human factors testing and environmental testing is really, really important. So understanding everything from transportation all the way to the utilization, and then, if a product's going to, in our case, our product stays with the patient through the entire time the catheter is indwelling. Well, the catheter doesn't stay in the hospital; it goes home. It goes to clinics. It goes, becomes a part of that patient for a fixed period of time in many cases. And so it's really understanding all of the different elements of that to make sure that your technology can be successful in those variables.
A question is if an engineer is in the middle of a design and they have a question or they're not sure about something about the user or the environment that they're going to be working in, what's the best way for them to get that information? Somebody from clinical, or would they contact their marketing rep? How does that normally work in the product development teams you've been involved with?
I think it depends on the organization, but I think you would want to go to the clinical contact, and it could be a marketing representative, it could be a sales person on the team, it could be a clinical person on the team, but somebody who is in the field and interacting in the field. So if there isn't a team member on your new product development team that is regularly working at the bedside with customers for let's say your already commercial product, I think it's challenging somebody on your team to become that person. So again, if you have a marketing representative, but no clinical representative, then it's asking the marketing representative to identify some key opinion leaders to engage in the project. And as a part of that engagement, one of the goals should be to shadow them, be in their environment, and understand, have a list of questions. What are your goals of being at the bedside or being in the healthcare setting that your technology is being designed for? If you're, if it's an office practice or if it's a clinic, again, you want to try to get in and see how your technology is going to fit into that environment and change or adopt into that need. So I would start by your marketing or clinical representative. Hopefully that person is already somebody who has contacts in the field that you're in, and it shouldn't be difficult for them to line up a meeting. You should have an agenda. So if you're an engineer, you should have a list of questions you're looking to have answered. Here are my questions. And be wary of the person who jumps to answer them for you, because that's their opinion. And what you really want to do is make sure that you're not just getting your team member's opinion to give you direction to keep going. Because in my early years, was definitely very opinionated and gave my opinion to my engineers once or twice. But I learned that it was better to validate my opinion with their experience and the direction. They trusted me more because I put them in the same environment that I built that opinion on. I brought them into the clinical setting because I always spent time in the clinical setting, and I helped them experience what I had feelings about or intuitions about and formed my opinion around. Again, it's best if your team is aligned and moving in the same direction. And I think that a good engineer asks for those experiences and wants to be a part of it. And I've learned in my years of working side by side with engineers, they're not comfortable getting outside of their environment. Many of them are introverts, and many of the marketing folks and sales folks are extroverts. It's a nice marriage. Have your marketing team member set up the meeting, be a part of it, go with you, coordinate and liaison that for you. A good team member would do that. And I always found that, if I couldn't take the engineer out of the engineering setting, setting up an environment or setting up an opportunity for them to meet with these folks, at a dinner meeting, at a lab, at a workshop is another way to get those interactions and allow the engineer to interact with those clinicians directly.
Oh, those are great ideas. So what's one thing that engineers can do today to improve their sales, clinical, and marketing for new product design? If they're working on something now, what's one thing that they can do today to improve that working relationship?
Have a cup of coffee or a beer at the pub. Just get outside the day-to-day routine and get to know your team members. I like to do team building activities. A couple of the projects I led in my past life, we did full-on team buildings with third parties. Hula hoops and rubber chicken kind of stuff. And it built an experience that's shared by those team members, and many of them will still remember them today. And that just gives you a shared common experience that will make your project, for however long it takes to get from point A to point Z, successful, because you've worked together through some of those shared experiences, and you've had those opportunities to build a relationship. Alternatively, again, it can be as simple as a cup of coffee, setting up a weekly chit chat, making sure you're not just moving the papers through the process, because again, you're working with a team, and having a team, having some camaraderie is really important to, I think, the success of any good project. Feeling like you're doing something for a greater purpose. Just to be able to say, I finished a project is one thing, but to say you finished a project with a team of people you admire and that you learn from, and that you're proud to have been a part of that team, is a different thing. And I think that's what everybody should be striving to do when they're working in a team environment and working to accomplish a goal like launching a new product.
I agree. And that was some of my fondest memories of working with you, is just the camaraderie that you fostered and built with the team. Even though you may not have been the project manager, but you certainly had a very big part in the project, and creating that kind of culture within the team project where the engineers could freely approach you, and you would be very willing to help get your viewpoint and your perspectives across and built into the design. So I fondly remember working with you on those projects.
Yeah, I loved everybody I've worked with over the years. I've always learned something from them. I try to make that a part of each of my interactions. And, I value quality because of working with people like you, who taught me how to read my quality documents as a young marketer and made sure that I understood certain things and sat in those meetings and challenged the conversation if it needed to be challenged. And I think that that's a really important part of the process is having the humility to have a perspective and know that it can be changed by someone else on the team. I also really learned how important certain things were in the quality process and in assessing and setting up, different aspects of the quality documentation, for instance, and risk levels. I remember doing a project. We brought a panel of key opinion leaders into the room, and they had red, yellow, green, and we read scenarios down the list, and they asked them to rate the probability of that happening. And we then weighted everything and every decision. It was a very fun exercise. So sometimes it's good to just sort of have a little fun with it and use the knowledge and experience. And I think that was one of the quality engineers on the project's idea. Like, do you think we could, bring a couple of practitioners in and have them help us weight this? And I thought it was a great idea and facilitated it. And we had a lot of fun with that. So the hard stuff doesn't have to always be hard, and it doesn't always have to be boring. You can sometimes step back and say, let's try this a different way and end up with even a better result because you did it that way.
Yes. Well, I'm hearing that you thought a risk management exercise was fun. So I will quote you on that for another time, because usually the opinion is not that. So just on the record, it can be fun.
It can be fun, even for marketing people who like to not be doing paperwork. So yeah.
So just one last question. Do you have any recommended reading or podcasts or websites that you think are in your world that would benefit engineers to listen to or look at?
My one go-to for anybody on a project team is John Gordon. He has a book called The Energy Bus. And if you're on a project team, or you're about to start a project, or you're going to lead a project, you must read this book. It's the 10 rules to fuel your life, work, and team with positive energy. There's actually a workbook for project team leaders. And I read this book at a very interesting phase in my career, and it was very insightful and life-changing for me. And I've actually used it several times since then. Anytime you need a little reflection and balance, this is a great book to open up and read. And I think, again, as somebody on a team, somebody leading a team, somebody who wants to be a leader within a team, your name doesn't have to be at the top of the documentation to be the leader. You can be a leader otherwise as well. But I think this is about energy and the energy you bring to being on a team. And it's an incredibly insightful book. So I highly recommend it. That's one I would give. I read, probably as many business books as the next guy, and, a couple of key ones that have led to certain processes I kind of drive my behaviors and my business leadership by. I would say John Cotter and the changes, his process of change management is key, because it really takes the human experience and helps to drive that. And then I would say, really looking at adoption and adoption principles. There's a paper out there called The Diffusion of Innovation, and using those principles to understand how a market experiences a change or technology adoption, and identifying with the subgroups within that shift, that adoption shift, and building upon those innovators and the early adopters and the laggards, because understanding each of those personas in your field or in your market is key to really driving the right support for their experience. If you think about the user's experience, or you think about your market's experience and the subset of that market, and then apply metrics to motivating that change, you can measure your success and then implement tools and resources that support them. In healthcare in general, another good one is the Checklist Manifesto. And that book can be read from a number of different perspectives, not just the clinician's perspective, but how we can do things better, and how using checklists to build better processes and measures of success in our work. It's a good book. And I'm sure they have podcasts and stuff, but I definitely like turning a page still. So as much as technology forces us to do digital and podcasts and vodcasts, I definitely still like turning a good piece of paper.
I understand that. I still visit my library and the bookstore for a cup of coffee. You never know what you're going to find.
Yeah, there you go. And that's something you can do with your teammates.
That's right. Grab my marketing friend and go get a cup of coffee at Barnes & Noble.
Grab your marketing friend and have a Barnes & Noble cup of coffee. Pick a book and have a book club meeting. There you go.
Again, we're talking with Laura. She's got the clinical marketing and sales background and involved in product development. And she is a great teammate to have for new product development for an engineer. So, Laura, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights and your viewpoint. I really appreciate it. Thanks,
Diana. It's a pleasure. I appreciate you.
If you like the content in this episode, visit qualityduringdesign.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter to keep in touch. This has been a production of Dini Enterprises. Thanks for listening.